Yep.
now?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Cool.
All right, guys. So trying to keep this sort of loose and a bit more interactive. But essentially, what this is the presentation that Carter did from AADAO. I think he opened the stage with this keynote, and I thought it would be a nice way of allowing people who's not in Dubai to get a sort of a glimpse of what is being discussed over there around the hub. Um, because really the hub finds itself again and again uh, trying to define itself, the different roadmaps that we can take with the hub, what we should bet on, where should the hub be going from here. Um, and really, AADAO is here to support, is here to accelerate. But it's very important for us that we have a common understanding of what we think is worth pursuing, right, for the hub. So that's what I'm here for, to run through that keynote that Carter did. I hope I'm not going to butcher it, because Carter was the one doing the presentation. We made the slides together before Cosmoverse. I wasn't able to go myself physically because of family, but yeah, I thought it would be a nice way. And in this format, feel free to jump in. Basically, I don't know if there's a feature next to raise a hand or something like this, but
Just start jumping sporadically if you've got a question, and
yeah,
maybe yell. Any
yeah, that
interjectory
works.
sounds, go for it.
That works perfect. So yeah, let's just dive in, guys, because we've sort of identified a few roadmaps that we think the hub could take. But before we dive into all that, let's just set some ground rules and some common understanding. So obviously, Cosmos is an ecosystem of interconnected blockchains via IBC. We sort of have, unified set of rules, similar architecture, which started back in 2019, and now we sort of have a thriving ecosystem with chains communicating seamlessly with each other. There's different components, different pieces to the stack that make this possible. I'm just gonna go through this pretty quickly because I think most people in here who's joining this world, we call it, on Passage, they would know most of these things. But yeah, we got the SDK, we got the application blockchain framework, APCI, consensus engine, Tendermint, and then all these different modules and components that makes the world go around within Cosmos. Cosmos and IBC, staking, etc., etc. Why Cosmos? Why are people drawn to Cosmos in general? The things that I hear again and again is sovereignty, interoperability. IPC is really becoming the golden standard that people are adopting in terms of having blockchains communicate with each other. Modularity, obviously being a hot narrative these days with chains like Celestia, etc. But really, it all started with Cosmos and the Cosmos Hub, arguably. Security, scalability, and open source. You see a lot of projects these days coming out, which is not open source. We've been open source from the beginning. So really, we're just bounded by our imagination here, which is both great, but it can also be a problem sometimes if you don't have a direction. And that's, I think, what we find ourselves, the situation that we find ourselves in right now. We can pursue various different roadmaps, various different options. But if we chase all of them, we're not going to succeed, right? So we need to sort of double down on some of them. Was there a question, Lex, or?
No, just hearty assent. Need clarity. Need to have that kind of unity of focus. There's so many opportunities in Cosmos. We were talking about this the other night with Joni too. Like, so many things we could be doing, and it's really about creating focus and aligning incentives. So just totally on board.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just to put some numbers to that, again, I think most people, they would be familiar with the map of zones. It's quite interesting to see sort of in the way back time machine how the Cosmos ecosystem evolved. In the beginning, was just a few chains, not much happening, and now it's really a thriving, beaming ecosystem with 100-ish sovereign chains, 1 billion in monthly IPC volume between these chains, a collective market cap of more than 40 billion. So quite a success story for Cosmos in general, I would say. And we want the same level of success, if not more, to happen on Cosmos Hub. So that's what we're here for, guys. Making Atom the leading innovator and sort of distant value capture, as people like to say. A few strengths that we listed, and we come to the weaknesses of obviously also. And I would love to hear people's take on this or pushback or whatever. We're open source from the get-go, very much the whole crypto blockchain ethos. It's still, I'm still wondering, scratching my head when I'm seeing all these different chains that are not open source from the get-go. I think it goes a bit against what we are trying to do here as an industry. There's no central development team. Obviously, there's informal, there's Haifa, there's I would say specialized teams, but it's not like there's one Solana team or one
Right.
Ethereum foundation that is responsible. Anyone can really come up and propose and contribute, which we see as a strength. Very active, very opinionated governance. Every time there's a proposal up, it gets debated rigorously throughout the on X and on the forum, etc. Which is usually the big strength that people point to when you ask people point blank and just passing by at conferences and whatnot. If you ask them what is the main strength of the Atom community, it's the governance that people point to. At this point, with consumer chains like Neutron, etc., we got widespread DeFi adoption, both on the hub and beyond, across the entire ecosystem. Excellent economic security. Some people might push back on this because of the Atom price action, which is what we're trying to alleviate or help move in the right direction instead of the wrong direction. And then high quality relayers and validators. That's actually something at AADAO that we are funding. Most people don't know this, but some of the large chunk sometimes, depending on the month, of our grants and the budget where we support is going to RPCs, relayers, validators, etc., to make sure that all the stuff that we take for granted, it just works smoothly. It goes for test nets also, etc., etc. But yeah, that works and has been working for quite some time, which is obviously a strength, having a good track record. 250,000 monthly active accounts is not dead, as some people would say. Cosmos is not dead, and Cosmos Hub is not dead either. And then quite a war chest, I would say, with the community pool of $45 million, depending on the day when you check, and the prices of Atom, etc. And then deep neutral liquidity. I mean, Atom arguably is the most liquid asset. That's what people, if they want to get into the Cosmos ecosystem, most people, if you ask them, they would have bought Atom, moved it to the Cosmos Hub, and then beyond to something else, or maybe just keep it inside on the hub itself, on a consumer chain like Neutron, etc. But yeah, Atom is generally the starting point because it's widely distributed and very liquid. So that's almost the strengths that we see at Atom, and I can't see if anyone is jumping, but if there is, feel free to pitch in. If not, I'll move on to the weaknesses. So just to take the flip side of some of the strengths that I just listed, the weaknesses of that is there's splintered mindshare. We have different teams working on different things. Sometimes there's overlaps. Sometimes it gets fragmented, and that's not always super productive. Having two teams or more even working, thinking in similar terms without actually sharing that, having a mind share of that. So that's obviously a downside in general to decentralization. There's no economic alignment with interchain growth. A lot of people, looking back, they argue that some portion of a transaction fee should have been going back to the hub or paid in Atom or whatever. So even though the Cosmos ecosystem is growing, thriving, etc., the hub itself doesn't really benefit from that, which is obviously a shame. Um, if you put your Atom and Cosmos Hub hat on, there's no clear growth flywheel. Obviously, some people would argue that getting more chains to adopt economic security and ICS, interchain security, building on the hub, that could be a vehicle growth flywheel, but it has never been defined. Like that's the number one priority, and that's what we should all put all our eggs in one basket on. So there's not really a clear way of getting that flywheel going, which is also I think one of the main reasons why we need to set sort of a unified, discuss at least a unified roadmap where we want to double down on. Regulatory uncertainty, that's always there, not just for us, not just for Atom, but for any crypto asset, I would say. Share security competition. I mean, it's a shame that all this restaking and shared security narrative. We've been working on that. We had something in production for quite some time with ICS, and then an icon layer comes in, or other projects just completely own that narrative now, even though we've been live and in production for much longer than an icon layer, for example. So yeah, competition is getting tougher. I think, in many ways missed the mark on that whole narrative, which is a shame. And people could argue that it's a losing battle at this point. We didn't double down when we should, and hence the ship has sailed now. Validator model, should it be, for example, anonymous validators instead of now, where you can see the brand, you can see who is validating what and how they vote, etc. Is that a benefit or a hurdle to governance? I mean, you see a lot of debates at least happening. That's great, but you could also, when you know how validators are voting, et cetera, we've definitely seen how there's the whole voting process and how proposals are both formulated and discussed um, is being swayed sometimes, and people are trying to game the system. Lack of marketing. We don't have like an Ethereum foundation or something like this where we can just push hard. It gets a bit decentralized and spread out. So, some people like AADAO, for example, will do one marketing push, and then another core team will do another marketing push. And if you add on top, like we don't have a unified roadmap and direction, it gets a bit scattered, right? So yeah, bringing that all together, no primary thought leader. We don't have a Vitalik. We don't have all these figureheads, if we should call it that. Arguably, of course, we got informal, where there's a co-founder. But yeah, we don't really have that same level of leadership, at least around the hub, that you see on other big chains. Conflicting visions. You saw that in full swing with Atom 2.0. If we just take one example, where there's different groups within the ecosystem that would argue for different visions for the hub. And as a result, there's an unclear sort of product market fit. Are we trying to bring chains to adopt ICS? Are we trying to build out, I don't know, Neutron as a complete DeFi and DApp ecosystem? What is really the product market fit that the hub is trying to find here? All right. Is there anything that you want to add to this weakness list, guys, or any strengths that you see that I haven't put in this slide that you think is worth bringing up? Um, Love to hear.
Yeah, super open to feedback or questions on this. I do think, just from what you said, Mark, that That's a very fair assessment. I really appreciate kind of like laying out both sides because it really helps us to understand, as a community, what are we up against? Creating traction, creating opportunity in the hub ecosystem for Atom as interchain money, whatever it may be. Like I think that's a really fair framing of kind of like, okay, cool. What's the situation? Um, yeah, super curious to hear more of your thoughts. But yeah, any questions?
Is, isn't there still somewhat of a problem with the decentralization? I mean, on any Cosmos chain, that like the voting power is held by a small amount of validators, and so
Mm.
they isn't that a
Yeah.
weakness that should be considered, that they are able to sway the chain,
Yeah.
any of the chains, in any direction, and not just one validator, because a lot of the highest validators are also the top validators across all the Cosmos chains.
Yeah. I would definitely say it's a weakness. That's also why I put validator model here, because I do see
Okay.
that as a weakness. I mean, the counter argument that I've heard, at least when I call it a weakness, is that, yeah, sure, but Mark, that means also they are accountable, right? You know
Right.
how they vote. They want to make sure they, protect their brand. Don't um, do anything that would hurt their brand, etc. But I mean, I completely agree. I think having such large concentration of voting power, which often tends to happen when, for example, you don't have anonymous validators. Because if you have anonymous validators, you don't have the same level of centralization around voting power. At least that, if you just look around in crypto, that's just what happens. It's not my opinion. It's just what I see
Sure,
looking at the
sure.
data. Um, so I definitely see that as a weakness. Yes, 100%. I agree.
Yeah, I
So
would
does your
say.
view of
Oh, go ahead, Greg.
go ahead. Well, so does your view of validator model weakness also include that some validators are afraid to vote in a certain direction because of their delegators and the views that they might have, that they might lose delegations depending on the way that they vote? I mean, you see a lot of
Yep.
validators that'll abstain even though they
Hmm.
have a, a perspective on the way that it should go, but that there would be political implications,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
placing a vote.
I think the key word is what you just said in the end. It gets very political very fast, right? If there's even the smallest risk at times for having delegators undelegate, then most validators will sway to abstain, basically, right?
Yeah.
To make sure business interest is protected, and that's a shame. I think you don't see that, for example, if you have anonymous validators. I'm not saying that we should have anonymous validators, guys. It's
Right.
just it's
Cost
the other
benefit.
extreme.
Yeah, just being able to label what are the difficulties of each side. And I would say, decentralization outside of like Bitcoin and Ethereum is a blockchain wide issue, right? In terms of like,
Yeah,
because given the fact that there are just so few people in the space in general, you're not going to see the same democratization of allocation. You're not going to see like, it's just, you're not going to see an even spread, right? Now, again,
yeah,
the benefit is that that does become up to each chain, right? With the app chain thesis, it is, this isn't necessarily a Cosmos Hub issue. It is an interchain issue in a sense, right? Because
mm,
because every project can have their own chain if they believe that's what they need, then it does create these smaller, like you mentioned before, some fracturing, right?
mm,
But at the same time, it gives independence, right? So again, cost benefit there. There's a lot that we gain, I think, by having this fractionalization, um, and I think this is going to be like you feel it maybe a little bit more, particularly at the beginning of the
mm.
of this era, right? Because obviously, like something like a Solana with a monolithic model, you're not going to feel it the same way because it's very concentrated, right? You've got everybody focused on one thing, one objective. Here, we're going to feel those pressures in different ways because even the community power we do have, or the liquidity or whatever, voting power is going to be segmented across different chains. Um, but I think once we reach a certain era of adoption, um, I personally think it's going to be the model that wins out in terms of independence, in terms of interoperability, and that combo. But yeah, I think again, both you guys are making the right points in terms of just kind of framing what are the obstacles we have in front of us.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Beans.
All right. So with all that said, guys, here's basically the way we see different roadmaps shaping up. And the way we've collected this is obviously part our own opinion, part what we hear from other core organizations contributing to the hub, and part sort of community feedback, if you will. Like we listen a lot to the community, we respond to the community as AADAO. We are a community-owned fund, so obviously anything that we support, anything that we grant, there's sometimes community feedback on that, and we listen very carefully to this. We are stewards of the community essentially, and we want to support anything that the community wants to support. And what we've seen around the hub and really Cosmos chains in general is there are different services that you can do for the interchain. You can provide security, you can provide liquidity, you can be a governance lead. Speaking of validators just now, is a key part of that. You can do venture. That's something that we are exploring. As you might have seen, AADAO is doing venture investments this year, where we essentially invest to create a return for the community. So it's much more sort of focused on the return on investment rather than building out, features and new things for the hub or for Cosmos itself. It's much more focused on the financial return, scalability, and then interesting capital, add-ons money, as I think Lex mentioned before. So these are sort of the services that we've seen people again and again mention that is possible to contribute with. And if we chase all of these rapids or just two rapids at the same time, you lose them both, right? So really this keynote that we did opening Cosmoverse and I'm doing now was to start the debate during Cosmoverse on which roadmap would be worth pursuing. So if we take the first one, and I'm gonna run through them all, guys, and then list them all at the end, and then I think it's worth the debate, which I look very much forward to. So the first one is what we call atomification, where essentially Atom comes from a standpoint right now where we are the most liquid, resilient, and neutral IBC native token asset. If we pursue this roadmap, we should look at inflation. We've already looked at inflation. We can do more there. So the good thing about inflation, I think, on that debate is that we clearly managed to do something there not too long ago. So we know we can do it again. And yeah, it's worth looking into that. Remove ICS. So hyper atomification is all about spreading out Atom far and wide, making it the asset that people sort of adopt and buy into if they want to buy into the Cosmos ecosystem. So not so much the technical route, more the sort of financial play where Atom is spread far and wide. So move any other like technical like that takes resources and focus, etc. should not be the focus. It should be more on the financial side. So that means remove ICS, remove Cosmos, and remove Community Pool even. Remove the XGov module, trim down the accounts module, and then what we call selective state pruning. So yeah, bottom line is anything that is created, any atom that is created from inflation which could potentially be brought down to zero if we want to go extreme. But any atom should be as liquid as possible, sitting on dexes and sexes, etc., and be traded far and wide. So that's the hyperatomification roadmap, the more liquidity focused roadmap. Then there's this security minimalism roadmap, where we freeze all non-ICS product developments. We invest in multiple restaking solutions. So double down, double click on the restaking narrative. Remove Cosmoverse. Right now, as you know, guys, we have permission Cosmoverse. There's debates about going permissionless on the hub. Remove all that to have minimal security risk, because obviously creating smart contracts and whatnot using Cosmoverse introduces the risk attack vector. Introduce rotating validator sets. So that's going a bit back to what we discussed just before, where right now, if you are a validator and you are in the if you are validating on Cosmos Hub chain, as long as you have delegation, you're active, right? But we could have sort of a rotation of these validator sets, like a churn mechanism you've seen on other chains. We can do the same. So, and the churn obviously has an algorithm to it where validators are competing to stay in the active set. So yeah, that obviously we do that to improve on security and making sure that the validators that are validating Atom are only like top-notch, able to compete validators. And yeah, in general, just remove code removal, trimming down anything that introduces a potential attack vector. So that makes ultimately Cosmos Hub a more sort of resilient and simple security provider for anyone that wants to rent security or adopt security using Cosmos Hub. A third roadmap that we could look into is what we call aggregate offering, where Atom liquidity is provided by Hydro, as you might have already seen, introduced by Informal. You have security via ICS, you have venture investments, and you have this settlement layer via shared sequencers. We call that Halo. Noam from Binary has a proposal up on that, where we essentially have, it's not called roll-ups, but it works in a similar way. You can have, if instead of launching your own ICS chain, you can spin up essentially a roll-up pretty quickly using Halo. So that's sort of an aggregate offering, like a menu card. You can do all these different things and try to do them all at once. This is somewhat what has been happening this year, I would say. We've been pursuing most of these throughout the year, where we try to provide liquidity, we try to offer security via ICS. We're doing venture investment in AADAO. We're doing all these different things in this sort of aggregate offering. And then just to double click on Cosmos Halo, which is for me an exciting roadmap and interesting approach that's iteration that the hub could take, where essentially the Cosmos Hub is securing a futuristic shared sequencer and settlement layer. So not necessarily spinning up an ICS chain, but more consumer chains that are using Atom as gas. That is key for Cosmos Halo. So of course, Neutron, for example, has its own token, etc., etc. When you use Cosmos Halo and the shared sequencer, the gas token is Atom. That's definitely something that we hear from the community a lot. All consumer chains should be using Atom as gas. Do that via Halo. We will have more contracts. So more like a DApp focused roadmap, not a chain app chain focused roadmap, um, with the pros and cons that comes with that. Um, so yeah, that's another roadmap that we can double click on and double down on. And then I think the last one, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, last one is interchain governance. So we talked about validators, and we talked about governance already. What we could do is basically freeze all product development and say product development is not for the hub. We haven't executed it well in the past. We're not going to execute it well in the future. If you're going to lean into that argument, at least that's what some people are saying. Let's just invest 50 million into the interchain, across different projects. We decentralize governance of these different venture investments. We stake it, we get rewards, and we help grow these investments that we're partnering up with, and build strong governance tools around it, so they become the best chains at what they do, the best app chains at what they do. Um, we increase the community pool inflation to fund these investments. So we have a continuous budget, and basically the hub at the end of the day becomes sort of a governance as a service provider, fully focused on what is it that we should invest in, almost like a decentralized fund uh, as the hub, not just as a DAO, but as the Cosmos Hub entirely. So yeah, that means the Cosmos Hub obviously would aggressively invest and have a say in all these different projects that we invest into, because we have a ton of tokens with voting power where we can vote with these. And then Carter, and I'm going to do the same, is sort of just raising questions on permissionless cosmosm on the hub. Yes or no? It's a continuous debate. Um, is there another roadmap that we haven't identified? But yeah, this was a lot to unpack, guys. So I'm gonna stop a bit here. I've listed up all the different roadmaps that I just went through, and then I'm sort of, checking out or comparing them based on product development, community pool cost, protocol governance, and protocol inflation. I'm not going to go through every single variable
Yeah.
here on every single roadmap, but this is how they compare essentially. And our message at Cosmoverse and also today is we think we need to choose one and then double down on it. So let's talk, guys. What do you think? Is there anything that we missed? Is there anything that you feel more excited about than others? Let's debate.
Yeah,
That
just
second to last one was awesome. Like the, I mean,
come on up a little closer,
there's
Greg. Come on up a little closer.
man, I'm gonna end up on top of you guys here. I feel like
Yeah.
there's always been complaints from relayers of the ability to get paid for relaying, and that one that you were showing was
Mm.
paying everything in Atom. And how is it that there would be no relaying necessary?
For the shared sequencer, you mean on Cosmos 8 or?
The second to last one that you showed, the one that was showing all of the consumer chains that use, would this just be for consumer chains? So I mean, there's, if there was a roadmap that was either no IBC relaying required across the Cosmos, or some better way for relayers to get paid, like funneling all IBC through Cosmos, or at least always having IBC channels open to the Cosmos main chain, so that we didn't have to worry about IBC connections expiring between like this chain and this chain. Like
Mm.
I've experienced problems with that a million times, especially off of Osmosis, when you have bought something
Yeah.
and then can't get it to the chain. Um, but like what is, there should be, in my opinion, a bunch of things focused on actually making Cosmos the center of the Cosmos again, so that there's reasons to go through it and that chains want to and have to use it. And if relayers were guaranteed to get paid for all their transactions in a meaningful way, and uh, other things were put in place, I think that would motivate people to vote for the roadmap to go in that direction, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of how it works exactly, and how using shared sequencers with this Cosmos Halo project does not require IPC relayers is more a question for no one really, and the team members there who's been working on this. But if I my understanding is that because you're using the shared sequencer, you don't have your own native token. It's not a chain in the traditional sense. So you don't have your own governance. You don't have your own native token. You inherit from the Cosmos Hub, hence the Atom token. Um, and yeah, that's one of the just that's just how it is when you build using a shared sequencer instead of spinning up your own ICS chain. But yeah, I'm
Okay.
probably butchering it here, so yeah, no one will be able to answer that better than myself from binary.
No, I love that. Um, for me, I was particularly excited about the which was it? Can you go back to the overview?
This
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. Interchain governance was really interesting, and
Hmm.
the security. So like I do think there's a really interesting case to be made for interchain security, right? Thinking about, okay, what does Atom do well as a hub, and thinking about like, well, shoot, so many people benefit in the Ethereum network or Solana because they only have to worry about one token, right? So like people being able to launch apps on, and not even talking about necessarily smart contracts, right?
Hmm.
But people launching other chains with interchain security, and having Atom as gas, right? Things like that, where it's like really you're focused on Atom, and then creating some really solid tools so they can have their own token or ecosystem on their interchain app, but Atom underlying that, right? There's a really interesting case to be made that just Atom's liquidity makes that a really interesting scenario where it's easy to get a hold of. There'd be a lot fewer hurdles for people trying to jump onto a new app if they're not jumping through all these same hurdles at the same time. Like, well, shoot, the token has low liquidity, volatility is high, whatever it may be, right? So I do think the interchain security narrative is strong. But the other thing that was really interesting to me was governance as a service, right? The interchain governance concept, because I do see a really unique opportunity, and I think this falls into the same vein as what Greg was talking about with the relaying infrastructure, is that there's just a powerful point to be made, and I was even thinking like um, you could have kind of like Atom, the Cosmos Hub, being kind of like the grandfather of the ecosystem, and I think there's a really unique impact here, basically cultivating new chains. It's not necessarily that they don't have their own chain, but Atom comes in as first opportunity to be a governance provider, a validator, um, and making investments in chains. And there could be some low tier offering for new chains, right? Where the hub's not taking a huge risk in putting in some investment into a new chain, a new project, but there's some way that they can exchange value at it's more accessible to a large group of people, right? Um, and get involved, and Atom can help seed new projects, right? Like the Atom starter
Hmm.
pack, right? It's a minimal commitment from the hub, but new chains get a small boost and advantage by collaborating with the hub. And
Hmm.
then yeah, I just feel like there are a lot of things there where there's a cool middle place between just having total shared security versus having your own chain, and the hub being kind of like a guiding force in that process, right? And then reaping the rewards when when chains do well, right? And so, yeah, you want to find a way that any chain can get involved in that. And obviously, like, if the hub is providing strong relayer infrastructure and driving incentives back to the hub, then everybody can take advantage of that, right? Because it really is just a service. The governance model or the validator model does have more risk to it because, you could acquire all these tokens to participate in governance and then it not pan out for that project. But I think there could be a unique balance. And yeah, I mean, if there's any chain that's kind of equipped to assess new projects and offer guidance and almost like a what would you call it, like a launch pad, but not that, right? There's a very different marketing bent to that mentality, but almost like that. There could be a unique balance between more risk-oriented investments and service-based investments in new chains that could make that kind of model really, really interesting.
So, hi guys. In terms of the IBC stuff and the problems we've all experienced in terms of clients expiring and many other things, not many, but a good few things, right?
Unique quirks of the IBC world.
I know that there's a good few devs or one or two that have done a lot of active work on IBC protocol, and it is good, but there seems to be a disconnect between what happens on the ground with the people that are actually running that software and using that software, which adds to the problems that people experience when liquidity gets locked on a particular chain, for example. And I think that with an oversight on what's going on there and looking into the communities, I think there is definitely work to be done that could remove the risks associated with user errors or validator errors, because they're the ones, in my opinion, this might not be a great thing for some people to hear, but I think that user errors are often the cause of stuff going down, and there doesn't seem to be a layer within the IBC software that can actively tell people or notify systems that something's wrong or an action to take. And so because this software is kind of developed from an engineer's perspective, and an engineer that is thinking in engineering mode rather than thinking in terms of user interface and uptime mode, the right communication back to these people running this software is lost, and it's quite devastating, to be fair. I've seen it firsthand on a good couple of chains because I work across a few of them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think some of the takeaways there are that some of the services that could be offered at an interchain level go far beyond just security, right? Security and the whole shared security model, there's definitely power there, but so many other elements. And Mark and Greg, you brought up, some of the stuff in terms of like relaying. But I
think relaying is the one.
Yeah, right.
It's definitely a big problem.
Oh yeah, right. And incentive models for relayers, right?
I don't think cutting out development is a really good move either for a lot of these things. We need good communications between these chains.
Yes.
That's an important cornerstone, if you like, from Atom back in the day. I remember it being spoken and the videos coming out in, I think, 2020 or something. And you need to have that ability for these chains to come along and grow and do the right thing. Some are going to fail, some are going to screw things up and not do the right thing and make the right decisions. But the interchain connectivity and the security behind it is what allows the ecosystem to grow, and it's a very strong fundamental, I think. And I just think it needs to be developed further. In terms of people requesting more money to act as relayers, I'm kind of mixed with that. I find it kind of cheeky in one sense, because it's like, hey, you're validating, you're getting inflation to validate, and if you're doing well on a chain, you're getting a decent return on that inflation. So this is just another piece of software to run as well as. And why are you complaining about running a small CLI application to do some relaying? And it may be that they're complaining because of the fact that to run a relay can be hazardous, you know, packets being stuck
Sure,
and this
sure.
type of thing, you know what I mean? And so it pisses them off, and therefore they feel entitled to, quite rightly in a sense, for their time. It's
Right, right.
interesting. I've thought before, if the relay software was relay logic was built into the node logic, like what would you say then? Because it's all built as one application type of thing,
Right,
you know,
right.
and it's serving two purposes, and it cuts that argument out that, oh, I need extra money because I'm running a relay software. Well, no, it's running via Guy or whatever the node software is called on whatever chain.
Yep, yep.
And it also does relaying as a part of that function. So perhaps that could be something that could be considered if bandwidth and money and everything else stood good to do something like that, of course.
Yeah, well, and there's an opportunity here not just to one, be a core provider of those kind of like interchain services, right, as the hub. Um, but there's also the opportunity and drive value back to the hub via that and by whatever mechanism. But also the opportunity to sell those as tools to providers, right? So like sell tools. So like, you know, you could get chains to buy into like, hey, these are the tools that we recommend your validators use. You know, promote validators that are using these tools because it allows them to make relaying easier, whatever that may be, right? Like there can be a lot of, and because of the reach and influence of the hub, I think there could be a huge educational front for recommending specific tooling, even though every chain obviously has, you know, freedom in terms of their how they want to structure and optimize their chain. It could be a really interesting mechanism for one, just providing those services to begin with from the hub, because it is a trusted, you know, kind of neutral party in some ways, and an essential place of connection and liquidity. But then also and starting to standardize what those services could look like. And as those interchain services are standardized, creating tooling that then other people can use, that it also drives value back to the hub, right? So they're passing off the tooling, so it doesn't continually increase the lift on the hub, but it still allows, as long as their tools are being leveraged, driving value back to the hub.
So if you're talking about driving value back to the hub, then rather than selling the tools, and I'm not a tokenomics expert, but there are people very close to me who are.
Real quick. We're going to get booted in just a few minutes here.
In 1 minute, I think.
In 1 minute?
That's all I was going to say is, look, if you ever watch Superman, it was all about getting 0.05 pence and lots of 0.05 pences together.
Right.
So rather than charging for the application, if you think of it from that point of view, and you create a systems that are good,
yes,
then look at it from that perspective rather than charging a chain.
Yeah, the reason credit cards exist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Give me 3% of every transaction.
That's a bit high.
Yeah, right.
You know, look small because you're looking futuristic.
Exactly. No.
0.05 or something like that. You know, not
totally
0.03, that kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah, and start to own the flow of value between chains.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Beautiful.
Okay, well,
thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna say.
I think we'll continue the discussion both online and in Dubai.
Yes.
Not in Dubai. But,
are you in Dubai, Mark? No, you're not. Okay. I've got people out there.
I'm due to family. I had to stay home.
You and me both, brother.
We might cross paths. Lex, are you Passage or?
Yes,
AADAO?
sir. Yep.
Your Passage, right? Okay, cool. We'll no doubt all of us will.
Yeah.
And everybody behind me.
Yeah, this stream will go live tomorrow, and we'll we can continue the conversation in the comments even. I mean, there's going to be a ton of opportunity to keep this conversation going.
Exactly.
Awesome.